people have come to us and said, well, isn't talking about sin and using the Ten Commandments in evangelism, isn't that a harsh and condemning message? It seems offensive. Don't we want to share a message of love instead of condemnation? How would you respond to that?
Well, if we only use the Ten Commandments when we're witnessing, it would be a harsh message and a message of condemnation because the Ten Commandments give us no hope. They just show us that we're guilty of breaking them. And then it becomes a hard and harsh message. In Romans 3:19 and 20, it says, so that we know that the law says, it says to those who are under the law that every mouth may be stopped and all the world may become guilty before God. Therefore, by the deeds of the law, or obeying the Ten Commandments, no person will be justified in God's sight. For by the law, the commandments, come the knowledge of sin. The knowledge of sin comes to us that, hey, we're sinners, we've broken the law.
So the law shows us our need, but then once the way is prepared, like you talked about, then we can present the hope and the answer to our problem.
Exactly.
And so then it's not condemning because Jesus is that hope.
Right. Also we become harsh and condemning when we're witnessing, when we try to do the Holy Spirit's work and try to convict somebody of sin. We can't do that. You cannot convict somebody of sin. You can't make them feel bad and give them hope at the same time. Only the Holy Spirit can do that. But when we try to do His work, we become harsh and condemning. And that gets us into trouble.
I've got to confess, I've seen some street preachers that have been harsh and condemning.
Yeah. I have too, many of them. Well, when the Lord started to teach me about the use of using the Ten Commandments in evangelism, and I remember one day we were doing kind of an open air type of ministry to kids, and the Lord spoke to my heart and said, I want you to use the Ten Commandments in open air in a sermon. And I thought, oh God, I don't want to be like those evangelists, those street evangelists. Because in my experience, most all the street evangelists that I'd come across, were harsh and condemning. It was really repulsive. You kind of walked around them. And now the Lord's asking me to use the Ten Commandments in open air. And I'm saying, God, I can't be like that. I don't like those guys. I don't like the way they preach. I can't do that. But it's kind of a dilemma because I knew God wanted me to use the Ten Commandments. And it was during that time, and I was my devotional time, I was reading and actually read from John 5:35, talking about John the Baptist. Now, when we think about John the Baptist, we think of him as somebody being harsh, condemning, chopping people's heads off as he's preaching the gospel. That's just the image that we get from him. But Jesus says about him in John 5:35, he says that John was a lamp that burned and gave light, and you chose for a time to enjoy his light. And when I read that, it's like I had never read that verse before in my life. Jesus says, you enjoyed his light. People actually enjoyed the truths that were coming from John the Baptist. When I saw that so clearly, it's like this understanding came to me at the same time, that when we try to convict somebody of sin, we become harsh and condemning. Or we could say that the flesh on fire stinks. Burning flesh stinks. But the fire of the Holy Spirit, when it's on a person, draws people. It's something that they enjoy listening to, even though it's making them feel uncomfortable. Even Herod, it says that Herod liked to listen to John. And it was John that was telling Herod, hey, you're living with your brother's wife, that's unlawful. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the big differences,
So when people talk about that they want to see a message of love, I think, well, what greater message of love is there than what, as it says in Romans 5:8, while we were yet sinners, God demonstrates his love towards us, that he died for us while we were still sinners.
Right.
That is the gospel, but we need to understand our situation, that we are sinners, to really understand the love of God. So the love is in the message.
Right.
Look what Jesus did to rescue us. What greater love has someone that he lays down his life for his friends? And then also love needs to be in the messenger. Paul said, Christ's love compels us. And if we're full of the love of God, we're going to want to help tell people about Jesus so that they can be rescued from their situation, they can be rescued from an eternity far from God, and that they can walk in the life that we have found.
Yeah, we usually go wrong when we start trying to do the Holy Spirit's work and convict somebody of sin. We usually become harsh, and that pushes people away. We just need to relax and trust the Holy Spirit's going to do His job. We don't have to do that. We don't have to try to convict people.
Right. But as we aim for the heart, the Holy Spirit does that.
Yeah.
One of the best compliments I ever received when someone was listening in on a conversation was she said, "It's so direct, but it's so loving." And that to me is exactly what we want to communicate. I mean, when we talk about what our problem of sin is and what Jesus did for us, it is a direct message. It goes straight to our very core, to our very heart. Yeah. But it is so loving when the messenger is full of the love of God, and you see the love of God in the message and all that He did, sending Jesus to die for us. I
remember one time I was witnessing to 4 men. They're probably about 40 years old, around that age. And there was a person with me listening from our ministry that was very good in using the 10 Commandments in evangelism, but I was leading the conversation, and she was listening. And it was a great conversation. And after, we just, the conversation was over and they left, she turns to me and she says, "Boy, I wish I could talk like you. I wish I could talk like you." And I said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "You know how to use the law in evangelism very well. I've listened to you many times." She says, "Yeah, but not like you. Not like you know how to get into people. You know how to get inside them. I wish I could, use the law like you." She kept saying, "I wish I could use the law like you." And I'm thinking, I don't know what she's talking about, because she basically used the same way I did. But she kept on saying, I wish I could talk like you. And so I asked the Lord, I said, what is she talking about? I can't understand what she's talking about. And instantly the verse came to my mind where it says that Jesus was a friend of sinners. And I said, oh, that's what she sees. That's what she sees, the love of God. Jesus was a friend of sinners. And that's how I look at everybody. Even these people I've never met before, they're all my friends because they're all sinners. Jesus is a friend of sinners. And that's how I approach people, as if they were my friend. And if they don't want to talk, I don't try to force a conversation on them. Mm-hmm. It changes everything. You gotta, they're not our enemies. You gotta look at them as your friends, and approach them as a friend.
And as we aim for the heart, are filled with the love of God, the Holy Spirit will be bringing them, drawing them closer to Him, bringing conviction of sin. And that's a beautiful thing to watch. So remember to aim for the heart.
Amen. And so I started telling them about Jesus and how He went to the cross and paid for their sins. When I started telling them this, I felt like I was throwing up on them, like I had the dry heaves. I was just, throwing up on them. They didn't notice anything. But that's how I felt as I was talking about Jesus. I feel like I'm throwing up on these people.